On Wednesday, Canada became the latest country to commit to recognizing a Palestinian state, and there are now more than 24 nations following suit. U.S. Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff also arrived in Israel for renewed diplomatic efforts concerning the war and humanitarian aid. Here's the latest on these stories and more.
Canada intends to recognize the state of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney made the announcement after a cabinet meeting.
Canada has long been committed to a two-state solution. An independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security.
Carney said Canada wants the Palestinian Authority to lead the state, but only if it implements needed reforms,
including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state.
Canada's decision follows a similar announcement by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. CBN's Raj Nair talked with Revelation TV's Simon Barrett, who says that the Palestinian Authority's goal is not to live side by side in peace with Israel.
Effectively, what they want is a state as a means to destroying the state of Israel. This is part of the intentions belonging to Fatah, which is the leading faction of the PLO that run the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. It's the same goals as Hamas in their covenant charter they wrote in 1987, calls for the destruction of the state of Israel and also Jews around the world.
Barrett says these announcements send a message to Hamas.
What message is this sending Hamas? This is sending a Hamas they don't need to negotiate. They don't need to release the hostages. And if they continue their violence and terrorism against Israel, then they will be rewarded with stateship.
Meanwhile, President Trump said Canada's decision threatens ongoing trade negotiations. In a post, he said their support for a Palestinian state would make it very hard to make a trade deal. Also in Washington, the Senate rejected 2 resolutions by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders to block U.S. weapons sales to Israel. A majority of the Democrats voted in favor of those resolutions.
U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff arrived in Israel as international pressure on Israel over the war against Hamas in Gaza is increasing. This week, a wave of countries announced it would recognize a Palestinian state if the war doesn't come to an end soon. Canada followed France and the UK in making the moves. Germany is holding off for now, but Palestinians are encouraged by what they're seeing so far.
Regarding Canada's recognition, for me, this is an achievement for us because all the countries have started. France was the first, then Canada and Spain. It's clear that we have reached a broader understanding of the Palestinian cause.
But Israel doesn't see it that way. Witkoff met with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem on Thursday and is touring Gaza with U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee today to inspect distribution of aid. Delivering more food to Gaza is their first order of business. President Trump tells NBC News that good management will prevent Hamas from stealing the aid. Israel is facing mounting pressure along with claims of deliberate starvation. Israel's ambassador to the U.S. is blasting those accusations.
In the month of June, 2,134 trucks were sent into Gaza. Only 260 arrived at their destination. That means 90% was diverted by Hamas. Now, you want to blame us for that too? I mean, for crying out loud, you want to blame us for conducting a war while we're providing as much humanitarian aid as possible? Hamas is using this propaganda to score points in the international community, and like a social contagion, everybody is picking this up.
Case in point, the New York Times finally admitted the photo of an emaciated child in their front-page article on Gaza starvation last Friday actually had a pre-existing medical condition. Even a former Times opinion editor called it, quote, a remarkable deception. But many believe the global headlines demonized Israel. Trump posted that the fastest way to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. Relatives of Israeli hostages took to the streets of Jerusalem Thursday. They're depending on Trump, Witkoff, and Netanyahu to make something happen. This group has been in staunch opposition to the way Netanyahu has handled the war in Gaza. But now that more countries are joining the UK and France in recognizing a Palestinian state, is forcing them to rethink their position, understanding that it creates a very slippery and dangerous slope.
This is my fear, that this is rewarding them while they are still hostages.
As for Palestine statehood, outspoken Hamas critic and son of its co-founder summed it up by saying, October 7 didn't happen because Palestinians were denied a state. It happened because they were given one.